We are sitting ducks for workload being a cause for burnout. Fundamentally, we have that intellectual curiosity. We love the idea of being at the forefront of finding something brand new that we can put our name on. We're enchanted by the fantasy of our legacy in the history books, and there will always be a line of people trying to get into this space. We felt this immense internal pressure to live up to some imaginary standard. We need to always work harder and try and find an extra edge. We're essentially battling against ourselves or the illusion that everyone else is a step ahead of us. The imposter syndrome, of course, plays a little bit of a role in this. All the things that we do, many of the things that we strive for, they are internal, intrinsic pressures that we place upon ourselves. Burnout is predominantly defined by three main components: exhaustion, cynicism, and professional inefficacy. Exhaustion, feeling of being overextended and depleted of your emotional and physical resources. Check. Cynicism refers to a negative, hostile, or excessively detached response to the job, which often includes a loss of idealism. Check. Professional inefficacy refers to a decline in feelings of competence and productivity at work, and people experience a growing sense of inadequacy about their ability to do the job well and may result in a self-imposed verdict of failure. Check as well. Exhaustion, cynicism, and professional inefficacy. If you have one or any of these, then you are very much defined as being on the spectrum of burnout. These are the world-leading experts on the phenomenon of burnout, and they've found 6 factors that systematically contribute to burnout happening. Workload is number one. Both qualitative and quantitative workload contribute to burnout, depleting the capacity of people to meet the demands of the job. In science, we're never going to escape this. The workload is going to be always present. And again, I talked about it, much of that workload is self-imposed because we're racing against the clock, we're competing against the world and driving innovation, bringing it to market, being the first to do so. The workload is always going to be there. We can't escape it. We are sitting ducks. Control is the second factor that leads to burnout, or more specifically, a lack of control or a feeling that you don't have control. Researchers identified a clear link between a lack of control and high levels of stress and burnout. Sadly, in science, nothing is ever in our control, really. Grant funding is not entirely in our control. Whether our papers get accepted by journals is again not really in our control. Experiment after experiment, paper after rejected paper, all of this loss of control starts to add up. Reward is the next factor that likely leads to burnout. Insufficient recognition and reward increases people's vulnerability to burnout. This is one that I think we could choose to fix because we have to just take it on face value that the reward is almost never going to be financial. Hopefully, some extrinsic measures of reward from your immediate supervisor or your supervisor, or if your discovery is big enough, your institution hopefully has some press release, has some local awards that you can apply for. Finding reward intrinsically, this could be one way that we separate ourselves from the risk of burnout. The next factor is community. Community, the ongoing relationship that employees have with other people in the job. When these relationships are fractured, a lack of support, no trust, unresolved conflict, there is greater risk of burnout. That does not mean it has to be this way in science. Unfortunately, I've heard many stories where it is like this, where students and postdocs in the same lab are competing to make the same discovery. That sense of suspiciousness, of lack of trust, of broken, fractured professional relationships, that comes from the top. That comes from the supervisor and how they set their students and their staff and their postdocs up for healthy competition, but ultimately success. This sense of community can also be a more grassroots thing, and I think it's important for more junior staff to organize social events. If it's up to the most senior member of staff to organize the Christmas party, then it gets the sense of forced fun. Right? When you invite your boss to your Christmas party, unless your boss is the coolest person in the world, still there's this inherent power imbalance and they're the ones organizing the social events rather than just being a guest. It will feel very forced, and that sense of community might breed further suspicions and further sense of isolation and alienation. Fairness, I'll just strike this one off the board straight away. Science and technology is not a fair game. The people who work the hardest, who are the smartest and the brightest, aren't always the ones who make the breakthrough and get the full reward. History is littered with many scientists who were this close to making the pivotal discovery, but through the work of their collaborator or someone who saw what they were working on but had the ingenuity to take it a step further, they were able to capitalize and win all the big awards. Fairness is not the name of the game. It will not be the thing that prevents us from experiencing burnout. But a stopgap to prevent that from happening has to be your values. If the outcome is not what we can control, if the ultimate recognition is not something that's within the individual's grasp, within their organization, your values have to protect the individuals from that inevitable outcome. You cannot control if a discovery actually makes it to market, but your organization has to have the set of values to really support people, support individuals if the outcome isn't really what it should be. And the values of respect, inclusivity, this is something that we can divorce from the ultimate outcome, which unfortunately in science and tech is all too often not particularly fair.